Hey, welcome back to the Girl Be Free podcast. I'm your host, Siobhan, your clarity cultivator and founder of Be Free Project. I help women who are ready to flourish, feel fulfilled, and be free to show up for themselves. I am extremely passionate about community, sisterhood, and personal growth. So if that's your jam, you are in the right place. And now let's get into the show. Hey, guys, welcome back. Now, this episode is going to be extra special because we are flipping the tables. Is that what we would say? And I am being interviewed by my very great friend, Denise Sumbry, founder of Positive Life Haven. Y'all already know she's been on a podcast several episodes ago. So if you haven't listened to it, make sure you go back and check it out. But she is my energy healer, my spiritual life coach, and I wanted to have a very in-depth conversation as it relates to from attending the Rise conference in Toronto to having a Reiki session and then where I'm at today. And it's such a powerful story that I want to tell that it's only right that she interviews me. So Denise, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Yay. And you are the first guest that's on here for the second time. So yay.
Oh, I love first.
Yes, you are the first.
Oh, I love it. And I also just love the fact that you are taking a step back you've done a lot of reflection,
Yes.
and we know that sharing is caring. And I just love the fact that you're now just taking a moment to be in the hot seat to
Mhm.
simply share your experience, which you're calling Rise to Reiki, the journey in between.
Yes. And it's so powerful, as you already know, as we're going to talk through this. And I just feel like I need to document this. So, as this glow up season that I'm officially in as of March 21st, I want to document this so people can hear my words and hear this transformation and say, oh, it all makes sense now. So, that is the intention behind this particular episode.
So tell us about the Rise conference and how you got to be a part of it.
Ah, so I was invited twice. I went in January, and that was my first time attending, and it was in Fort Myers, Florida. And I did do an episode all about that experience, and it literally changed my life. Where I came back so charged up, so full of energy. I was glowing, like everybody could see that saw me, whether on social media or in person. Like there's something different about you. Like you are lit up. And this conference is hosted by Rachel Hollis. She wrote Girl Wash Your Face and Girl Stop Apologizing. And it is a woman's personal development conference. And it's a 3-day conference. So it's all about owning your past, owning your present, and owning your future. There's several speakers that attend. And then also, we do a lot of inner work. And again, I came back on fire after I attended the conference, like, yes, I'm ready to get it. And then again, I got an opportunity to go again in this past March in Toronto, which, as we're going to talk about, was a completely different experience from the first time. I thought that I was going to come back fired up. It's the same conference, same speakers for the most part, same content, but it affected me in a totally different way. But it was a good thing. It was definitely a good thing.
Yeah, and I think it's really good to point out that, you've been doing this work as founder of Be Free for a long time now, and you're building community and making so many beautiful connections, inspiring women, promoting the healing process. The one thing that is very key here is that you, as a founder, and for everyone else, the growth and learning doesn't stop. So I love how you put yourself, as a woman who helps other women to personally develop in their life, but you need that as well, just as I. So I think that's a beautiful, beautiful point that you are continuing to walk in your journey and your healing and putting yourself in places where you're cultivating your growth and development.
Yeah, that's so important to me. Like personal growth is everything and it never stops. And so I am overly grateful of the opportunity that I got a chance to attend not once but twice, VIP. So that's even a whole different experience in itself. And then to be around people that are also on this personal growth journey with me, it feels amazing. Like, I highly recommend this conference to every single woman, and I I feel like everybody needs to be doing this inner work, like that we're going to talk about today, so that you can grow and flourish and find fulfillment and be free. Like, everybody needs to be doing it. And I hope that in us having this conversation, that is going to inspire at least one person, whether it's to have a Reiki session, attend a conference, join the Be Free Inner Circle, whatever that looks like, find your space to start doing the work.
Yes, absolutely. Now, before we dive into specifics from Toronto, I think it's very important for you to just kind of set the stage energetically. When you came back from Fort Myers, what would you say were the top three energies that you felt?
I felt magical. I felt like I was lit up inside, and I felt more free to show up as my most authentic self.
Mm,
And when I was at Fort Myers, God kept speaking expansion to me. Like, I kept hearing that over and over and over again in my spirit at very specific times during the conference. Now, keep in mind, and I think that this is important to note, in Fort Myers, I was only there for day 2 and day 3
okay.
of the conference, versus the second time around, I was there for all 3 days, which we'll talk, the energy was
Hmm.
different, very, very different. So that is what that first energy experience was like. I came back home, and I got back home like Sunday, late Sunday night. Monday morning, I was up at 5 in the morning, and I've been up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning every single day, sticking to my morning ritual.
Hmm.
And that has been transformative in itself.
That's beautiful. And with Toronto, if you can share again the three energies that you felt from Toronto, and if you're led, go ahead and talk through why you felt that.
I felt I felt emotionally drained from Toronto.
Mhm.
My expectation when I came back is that I would be recharged again.
Mhm.
So at this point, I would be floating, like, I'm like, oh, you about to really, really, really be fired up. But when I got back home, I felt emotionally drained. I felt very uncomfortable internally,
Mhm.
and I couldn't shake the feeling of getting out of this yucky type of feeling. So,
Mhm.
just a few things that I want to point out as it relates to the Rise conference. The first time was in an arena, and the arena was much bigger with 4,000 women. And the energy had somewhere to go because there were doors open on the side.
Mhm.
In Toronto, it was more so like in a theater. So it was 4,000 women, but we were more intimate and we were closer together. The doors were closed. The energy had nowhere to go. Now,
Mhm.
I take on energy, whether it's positive or negative. I can feel it. I can
Yeah.
experience like all of that. And I couldn't put my finger on it while I was there. So this came after, when I got back home and reflecting and doing all that. But I felt all of the energy in the room.
Mhm.
So on day 1 was Own Your Past. And there were speakers there. Jen Hatmaker was amazing. She talked about stand up for your sis, and her talk was really, really good. And so after that talk, we had this activity that we had to do. We all got binders, and the Rachel would read off these statements that were in the binder, and they were like, I have been molested, I have been raped, I am financially struggling, I've cheated on my spouse, I'm raising a child with mental illness. Whatever negative thing you can think of, it was on this list. And I feel the reason that we were doing this activity is that even though there were 4,000 women in the room, you began to feel like it was just you and her, or you and the small group that you were with. And so she said, as I'm reading through this list, no, before we even got to this part, she said, I want you to go through and check off the boxes. of each one that pertains to you, and whether you feel like that now or you felt like that in the past. So, of course, I'm sitting down and I'm looking at this paper like, whoa, this is some heavy stuff. And again, I didn't have this experience in Fort Myers, so this was very new to me. So I'm crying and I'm checking off these boxes. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so after we get finished, she said, I want you to tear the page out of the book and I want you to fold it up. And you fold it up very small, and then we just had to pass it. So
Mm.
now you're releasing what you have written and you're passing it around. And we probably passed it around several times. So now my paper is out here in the audience.
Yeah.
And I feel that, right?
Mm.
And now I'm holding another woman's paper, and she checked off all these boxes. So, oh my gosh. And so we had to open and see, what was checked. And so Rachel would go down the list. And she said, every time I read off a statement and a box is checked, I want you to stand up and sit back down. So as I'm looking at this paper, some of the boxes were similar to mine, but many of them were not. So now not only is my energy released out into the audience and I'm thinking about that, but now I'm holding space for a whole other woman who has checked off some very hurtful stuff, and she's in this room with me. So the first several boxes I have checked off, I'm standing up, I'm sitting down. And then I have a series of boxes that weren't checked. So what I do, because I'm in VIP or Premier Plus or wherever, I'm in the front of the audience. So I can turn around and see all these women behind me, whether they were on the floor with me or they were sitting in the terrace. And so tears are streaming down my face because all I see is these women standing up and down, and all I see is pain. And my heart says, I just want to hug her. I just want to do something and so I was taking on all of that energy, and it was heavy because I just wanted to help and support. And so after we go through this whole exercise, and it's probably a good 20 to 22 statements on this list, I was done after that.
Oh, I'm
Done.
sure.
And I go back to my Airbnb later that evening and I get on Instagram for a little bit. I'm like, y'all, today I was emotionally drained. This was a lot heavy. Fine. I journaled, and that was that. That was a start of when I was feeling emotionally heavy.
Just hearing you talk about the day one owning your past, like I like legit have chills right now. And I can understand why a conference in this stature would have such an activity, because when you think about, you know, present world and what you want to cultivate and manifest in the future, you can't just continue sweeping these things that, you're ashamed of or you feel guilty about, or um, things that essentially have been hidden and never nurtured, and just swept under the rug, right? And especially for people who are empaths, right, and feel such as yourself, that you can feel energy, and it's that fine line between being able to observe and not absorb,
Mhm.
and essentially I can see that being a space of healing, and but just the heaviness with that many people, and what you said, no outlet for the energy to go, it can seriously have an impact on you physically and emotionally.
Yep.
And I think another thing that as you were talking, your senses are heightened. Not only are you feeling, right, you're hearing, you're also seeing. I love how you said, I turned around to look, right, at these women standing up, sitting down, stand at these with these very, very heavy and vulnerable topics, right? Um, that is just, again, that just adds to what you're feeling and what you're
Mhm.
experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we can hear even as you're talking about it, it's still striking a chord in your heart space.
Yeah, because my hope that these women left and got the support that they needed,
Yeah.
that they left that conference like, I got to do something. Because, like you said, many of the things that were mentioned on that list, they probably swept under a rug a long time ago. And it's very important that you deal with your past because you can never walk into your dreams or your future. And so many people want to avoid that past and never heal, but yet you got these big dreams. It don't work like that. So when I talk about being in my purpose, and people ask me or have asked me many times, like, how did you find your purpose to be a light and empower others to be free? I went to therapy. I did my inner work. That's what I did first. Had I not went to therapy years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation today,
Right.
you know?
Right.
So yeah, so that I felt that. I felt all of that that day. Yeah.
And it's almost like you, the individual that you are, you were almost like balancing your own healing, right? But then also
Hmm.
including this innate nature that you wanted to help all these women.
And let me point out something. I don't even think the conference had anything to do with me.
Mm.
Like the first time I went, oh yeah, you about to get your energy, you about to get charged up. I'm about to, God, like I'm about to restore you and show you who you are. And you're going to be bold and you're going to take up space. That was the first conference. The second time, it was like, let me show you how you about to help other people. Let me let you feel, oh my God, and this is just coming to me. Let me allow you to feel other people's hurt and pain so that you have more compassion for other people. So when you do this work about cultivating community, I want you to feel it. I felt it that whole entire weekend. I felt it. And it wasn't just me. It was people that were close to me that were feeling it as well. And we've all come back on a whole nother level. So I had to experience that so that I could rise up in my community and be more of a vessel so that I could be used. Had I not experienced that particular conference in that way, I it would have just been different. And so when I was walking down the streets of Toronto, I kept thinking like, I'm so grateful to be here. Even though the energy was what it was and the conference was still amazing, this is just my personal experience. I still kept saying, I'm just so grateful to be here because here I am getting the opportunity to not go once in January, but to be here a second time, to travel outside of the country all within the first quarter. My business is thriving. Everything in my life is going good. And now God is like, oh, but let me get you here so that we can take this to the next level. Just, and that just came to me. That just came to me.
That's
Yeah,
powerful, Siobhan.
man. Yeah.
That's powerful. You mentioned when you got home, you did some journaling.
Yeah.
What else helped you that evening to get back centered in a sense?
Good food. I ate good dinner that night. We went to a really good restaurant that night. And then when I noticed, like, cause I'm community, right? So I'm like, oh, let me get on Instagram and tell y'all what I'm feeling. Okay, good. And then let me journal. I'm trying to think, did I do anything else? I did burn sage the next morning, but I lit off the fire detector jazz, so we couldn't do that anymore. Because I'm like, I gotta cleanse, I got something, you know. I had my stones that I purchased from you. I'm not sure what stones I had exactly, but I definitely had stones on me, and I got a good night's rest, and I was ready for day two. And so with day two, I knew what to expect because I had this, you know, I had done it in Fort Myers, but again, it was still different. The people in the audience, like the conversations that Rachel was having with some of the women in the audience, affected me in a different way. And then we had to do this other exercise where you had to write down all of your insecurities. And as you wrote down your insecurities, you then had to partner up with a stranger and you share your insecurities with them, they share their insecurities with you, and you're not allowed to say anything but just to make space for them. So that still made me like, oh, you know, here I am telling my insecurities again, but to a whole nother person, but then hearing her insecurities. And I had an older woman that I was partnered with. And so hearing some of the things that she shared, I'm like, man, oh. And so then um, there was a young lady who was with me who was crying in her seat. And so I felt led to go and hug her. And
Mhm.
as I'm hugging her, God started speaking to me. And so I'm
Mm.
hugging her even tightly. And I'm just, whatever God had laid on my heart in that moment, I started sharing it. After we released from our hug, God's spirit was all over me. And I just started praising God where I was. And there was
Mhm.
this lady who walked up to me and she hugged me so tightly and she said, everything is going to be okay. And I'm like, I'm good. I'm
Mm.
good. I am, I was in a space of giving.
Yes.
I wasn't in a space where I needed to receive in that moment. I was giving. So when it was hugging the young lady that I was with and then feeling, the spirit of God, I feel like that I know was over me, and then getting that hug from that lady, like, and then releasing, like, that's, I guess releasing my insecurities with the other lady, but then also receiving hers. That was very powerful. It was a very emotional space.
Mm. Absolutely. And this was the day 2 activity?
This was day 2, which is called Own Your Present.
Mm.
So that was just one of the many activities that we had to do, along with other speakers that had came up as well. Yeah.
And what was day 3?
Well, let me pause and
Okay.
say with day 2, right? So even with all of that, there's more energy. So
Mhm.
yes, I'm partnered up with one lady in particular, but I know in this room, everybody's sharing their insecurities. There's tears and everything, right? And so I believe it was that night, and this is very important for the conversation, how we're going to continue to go with this, is that I looked in the mirror. I was getting ready to take a shower, and I looked in the mirror, and it was an extremely ugly version of myself. Now, I am beautiful. I know that I'm beautiful. There's no question there. But what I saw in the mirror was my present version of myself. And it was so ugly. And I just cried and cried, like, oh my goodness, like, ugh, what is that? Like, it was just the most, I did not recognize myself at all. I did
Mm.
not. And I didn't even know what I was seeing. We gonna find out as we continue with this conversation, but I had no idea. And so that was, I believe that was on day 2 when I was taking a shower before bed to prepare for the next day. And then day 3 was Own Your Future. So that is the best day because it's not as heavy, and we're talking about dreams and goals and vision, and Rachel is helping us map it out. And then there's amazing speakers that speak, and it's just really great. And now I love talking vision and dreams, you already know. So that really filled me up. And when we were getting ready to leave, like, because at this point, day 3, the conference is over, and this lady walks up to me. And again, 4,000 women in this room. She
Mhm.
walks up to me and she said, I just have to stop you before you leave. She said, your energy lit up this whole room. She said, I watched you for all 3 days, and I watched how you engaged. I watched all of that. And she was like, and your energy is just so bright. And I just want to give you a hug. And so I hug her and I say, thank you. That is the best compliment that somebody can ever give me, because that shows me that I'm in my purpose, that I'm being my most authentic self, and that my light is shining bright. That out of 4,000 women, you took a moment, because we were leaving, to say, I felt your energy.
Mhm.
Now, keep in mind, I have been feeling the energy of all of this in the room this whole weekend, or, in this place, but you felt my positive energy and you knew you had to say something to me.
Yes. Yeah.
That was fully confirmation that that's what I was there to do.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's
Oof,
beautiful.
yeah. I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because every time I talk about this to my friends, I just feel it even more,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know? Yeah.
It's such a beautiful life experience for you to reflect on, and and I know we'll get to these revelations, but it's almost like the gift that just keeps on giving for you.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
through you sharing, right, you're sparking
Yes.
um others intuition, others spiritual guidance to kick in, right, and
Mhm.
notice how some of these key things can show up in their life,
Yes.
right, and what actions that they can take. You wrap up the Rise conference in Toronto, and now you're headed back to Cleveland, back to home.
Yes.
What were some of the things that you just were feeling holistically for yourself as you were making the trek back home, back to reality, back to normal life?
When I got back to Cleveland, I so when I got home on Sunday, I had to take my daughter to an appointment. It was beautiful outside. The sun was shining and it was cold in Toronto. So I was grateful to be back home and the weather was warmer, like in the 60 degrees. So I'm walking outside and I'm just taking it all in and I'm just walking. I'm like, oh, I'm so grateful for this. I'm grateful, just practicing gratitude. And I'm in tears walking around. Nobody said anything to me, but I'm just doing my thing. And as I'm walking, I just so happened to pull up your Marco Polo, which is a video app that you can send videos back and forth to your friends. And you had sent me a video and you said at your event that past Friday while I was in Toronto that 3 people had brought up Be Free Project.
Yeah. Yep. They sure did.
And the one thing that stood out to me was like you said, the one young lady mentioned mother wounds and how she had been listening to my podcast and how it had been helping her. And when I heard you say that, I cut off the Marco Polo. I didn't listen to what else you had to say at that moment. And I'm crying because my name is being talked about in rooms that I'm not even in, and that my work is so valuable. And it was confirmation that I'm in a whole other country and that my work is impacting other women just because I decided to share
Yes.
the deepest parts of me. And I
Mhm.
don't take those mother wounds lightly because that is some deep work that if people who deal with that, like, and what and everything that I've been through. So to know that my podcast was helping her and she felt compelled to share it at your event, then you get it back to me in a moment that I'm practicing gratitude and wondering like what is going on, all of that. And then I'm crying. So then I sit down on the bench and 321 is my spirit number. It's my
Yeah.
birthday. I see 321 everywhere. It'll come up on my receipt. I will look at the clock and it's 321. And you've taught me that that's a spirit guide speaking to me and to honor that. And I've been doing that for a minute now. And so I sit down on the bench right after closing that Marco Polo and I look up at the address and it says 13210, 13213. And I'm like, oh, God, you're confirming what I already feel inside. And I cry some more, like, okay. So that was that day. And so on the following day, which was Monday, my friend messaged me on Instagram and she was like, how are you feeling? And I said, I'm very uncomfortable. And I
Mhm.
cannot shake this feeling that I have. I can't shake it. And I said, what I liken it to, and I'm explaining this on another episode, is that when a woman is pregnant and you are in that third trimester, 9 months, but you still got a few more weeks to go, you are extremely uncomfortable.
Mhm.
You sometimes may be out of breath. You cannot sleep. Like nothing is satisfying to you, like nothing. And it's just like I'm just ready to have this baby and to birth this baby. But then you look down at your stomach and you're like, man, I've grown so much over the last 9 months. And I didn't have a belly, and then it just started developing and getting bigger and bigger. And as it's getting bigger, you realize that you are carrying life inside of you, like you're carrying life. And as you're carrying life, you're like, oh, my life will be different once I birth this baby. I will not be the same woman. I will be someone's mother. Everything is going to shift. So it's like you're in these two different spaces where one part of you is ready for the baby to be born because you're tired. You're tired of being in this place. And then there's another part of you that's like, I want to hold on to where I'm at because I don't know what it's going to look like to get to the other side. And I'm scared and I'm nervous and I don't know. So you're stuck in between these two spaces. And that is what I felt like. There was this internal tug of war with my future self and my present self. And because I've been doing this work for a very long time, I wanted to stay where I was comfortable.
Yeah.
But there was this pull like, no, you baby girl, you've been doing this work for a long time and it's time to shift. and go to that next level. But there was this, I just, it was, I wasn't ready. I thought that I wasn't ready, but I felt all of that inside. And that was Monday.
Mhm. And I love how, you are allowing these things to, you're feeling what's going on. You're not trying to quiet it. You are, even though it's uncomfortable, also it's the fear of the unknown. It's almost as if you are, stepping in from one reality to another reality. And what is going to be on the other end of that. I think when you and I talked, it was almost like you were feeling like one step in, one foot, one foot in, one
Yes.
foot out. you
Hmm.
know and the analogy that you're using too with your current self versus your future self, which I know you'll talk a little bit more about too. We have to keep in mind that our current self, the past self, I mean, that's what's been around for so long, right? It's that vessel that you've learned so much, and you've had a lot of fun, right? And a
Yes.
lot of healing. And it's not a process that you're just gonna cut like a ribbon, like snip
Hmm.
into
Hmm.
the next.
Right.
There isn't a very emotional and mental attachment there. And yeah, you don't want to let go, because this is all that you have known
Yes.
up until this very point.
Yeah.
And that's why people talk about the fear of failure, but now the reality becomes, the fear of success,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm. Hmm.
stepping into that. um,
Yes.
and so for you to allow what you were feeling to 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 flow
Hmm.
accordingly, without any judgment, without any, again, just trying to quiet it. No, I don't have time for this, right? But then also acknowledging what was going on. Like,
Yes.
you didn't just keep what you were going through in that moment with yourself. You shared it with me, you shared it with, your other confidants, right? And
Hmm.
so you allowed other women to hold space for you
Yes.
in
Yes.
this unknown
Hmm.
space. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure we pointed that out as well.
Yeah. And I was very trusting with certain people because I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And usually I can get myself back together. I know, like, I've been doing this work for a very long time. I know how to get me back together. And after that was Monday. So on Tuesday, I was feeling the same. I could not work. I was barely eating. Um, I was crying. So that's too, I got to point that out. I was crying off and on a lot. And I'm like, why are you so emotional? Like, what is happening? And I had to pick up some stuff for work, for business or whatever on Tuesday. I could not remember. I was on autopilot. Well, I could not remember how I was driving down the street and got to the freeway. And I remember telling my daughter, I'm like, I don't remember how we got here. I don't know how we got to this spot. That's how my mind was just going. And yeah, I was on autopilot, still feeling uncomfortable. And so then when Wednesday came, I was like, listen here. Like, I was still feeling the same kind of way. And I reached out to you and I said, I just need to come to your office and get a hug from you.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I was self aware enough to know what I needed, that I didn't need anybody to pray over me. I didn't need to go into a church and somebody to lay hands. I needed energy work. That is what I knew that I needed. And so when you told me, like, oh, I'm going to be in the office from this time to this time, I was in my car, like, vroom, like, we getting out of here. Like, we are getting out of here.
Yeah.
And that was so transformative for me.
Yeah. And I remember how we talked about before Toronto.
Hmm.
We knew that a Reiki session was due for
Yes.
you.
Yes.
And I remember saying, Siobhan, you'll know if you need to get it before or after.
You sure
Just let me
did.
know. just let me know, right? And so as things transpired, you know, it was very much aligned.
Oh my gosh.
And I just love how it organically happened that you came in post Toronto, because that's when you really, really needed it, you know? And I think the beauty of you knowing what you needed, right? And I think this is a message to everyone who's listening to your podcast and part of your community and beyond, that when you hear that voice that says, go do this, this is what you need, even if it's something that you have done in the past, or maybe it's something radical and new, you know, that you really haven't um, partake in before, you know, you have to honor that voice, even if it's a
Yes.
simple inquiry, right? For you, it was a simple inquiry. I need to come
Get
see
a
you.
hug. I needed a, all I didn't ask for Reiki because I knew
Yeah,
my session was scheduled for March 18th.
yes,
I
that's right.
needed, yes, I needed a hug.
Yes. Yes, that's so true. I forgot about that. Your Reiki session was scheduled a week later.
Yes, it was
A
a
week
week later. And it just so happened in all this, the way that everything was aligned, that I ended up going on 3/11/20, which, going back to what I just shared, is that 321 is my spirit number.
later. Hmm. Yeah.
God is all in this.
And we
So,
we
oh
just had that revelation, what, 2 days
a
ago?
few days ago, yes, yes, yes,
I had a
yep.
good ugly cry on that synchronicity.
Girl, yes, yes, yes,
And so beautifully, I'm like, come
yes.
through, I'm here. I'm like, I'm in the midst of, you know, getting the office together for open house. Don't judge the space, you know.
I ain't care.
Like, he
I
was like, I don't care.
mm-mm.
And, you know, when you stepped into that office, I just remember you taking just this huge exhale, you know, of breath. And it was like, I'm home. I'm home. And we embraced.
We did.
And what did you say? What did you call? You said, I'm gonna cry on your bosom or something.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, I just need to weep on your bosom.
Yes, weep on your
And
bosom.
I was, when we started hugging,
Yeah.
there was such a release, and I was weeping and snotting all on your, like, it was all coming out, right? And I felt safe. I felt safe.
Yes.
I felt like I could be vulnerable. And I remember hearing in my head, like, step closer,
Mm-hmm.
but I could not move my feet.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that you felt that because you started hugging me tighter. And I felt the light and the energy off of you. Like, it was like almost like the energy was wrapping its arms, if you will, around me. And I was just like, as you said, like, I felt at home. Like, I made it to where I needed to be.
Yeah. And you are so right. I did, just as spirit was speaking through you to step closer, spirit was speaking through me, embrace harder.
Mm-hmm. I
You
felt
know,
it.
I did just that. Grabbed you so tightly
Yeah.
and just was wholeheartedly in the moment and exuding just love and peace and calm and support to you in that moment. In that moment. And it was a beautiful, cherished moment, you know, that I will cherish forever.
Me too. Me too.
And I was like, oh girl, no, you about to lay on this table today.
Yes, yes, yes. Like, whatever we thought, you ain't getting just no hug. You need some energy work. I
Yeah.
can
Oh,
feel
and
it.
yes, and that's what it was. I said, well, Siobhan, I can get you in. I said, we'll do an aura clearing. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
was
You
like,
sure did.
I'll just clear your aura. It's not going to be as lengthy, honey. You had a full,
I sure did. A full Reiki
full,
session.
full Reiki session. And for those who are unfamiliar with Reiki, Reiki has been around for many, many years. It is a ancient and holistic alternative or modality. It actually originated in Japan, the formal term of it, but it's also very similar to what we know in our community, kind of laying hands on.
Mhm. Mhm.
And at the very minimum, Reiki provides very, very deep relaxation, reduction of stress, and also the harmonic balance of your mental, emotional, spiritual connection within self. And I do have clients who come for very specific intentions,
Mhm.
whether that is maybe they are dealing with things more on a physical level. I work with clients who are in conventional therapy for like RA, arthritis, cancer, lupus, and more. But the bulk of my clientele comes for the spiritual development and soul evolution. And um, what Reiki does, it's unseen energy flow from the palm of my hands. And I'm just the vessel. I'm just the vessel that allows this very powerful and healing energy to flow from one being, myself, to another, which is the client. And it helps to clear any energetic blockages within your body. You know that it's working because you may feel sensations, you may feel tingling, you may feel warmth, coolness. I have some clients where their body will jerk, and I know in your session, which you can talk a little bit more about, your right arm was going to town, but we know
Mhm.
that that signifies specifically for you
Yes.
when spirit is working through you. And um, during Reiki, I do work with the energetic centers within your body, most commonly known as the chakras, that correlate with different aspects of our life, whether that is especially emotionally, like dealing with fear, guilt, low self-esteem, self issues with self-worth. So most commonly known as the chakras
Mhm.
that um, correlate with different aspects of ourselves internally, whether on the emotional level, whether it's fear, guilt, lack of self-esteem, confidence. Maybe it's even at the heart center where you're having trouble with self-love and loving others, right? Or communication, your intuition. So that's what I mean by when we talk about harmonic balance, not only at a mental level, a spiritual level, but an emotional as well as physical level as well. And a post Reiki, clients will experience immense clarity, immense clarity. So if there is things that you have intentionally decided to work on, especially when you're doing inner work and personal development, or maybe even a more spiritual connection to the self and the divine, right?
Mhm.
You start to hear, right, and feel the things that will help you on that path and on that journey. Um, and as I mentioned before, the clients who may be experiencing physical tension and ailments and things of that sort, get relief from that. I had a client over a year ago who had rheumatoid arthritis and joint pain in her right
Mm.
elbow. And since her Reiki session, no more pain in that elbow,
Mm. Mm.
because whatever she was experiencing at a mental or emotional level, creating that dis-ease and pain and
Yes.
discomfort that is related to her diagnosis as well, was able to be cleared and moved
Mm.
out, where she didn't experience any more pain in that area. So for your Reiki session, the intention was to really clear your aura, knowing that you were amongst 4,000 women and the energy being so heavy, as well as when we talk about you being in that space of trusting, vulnerability, and uncomfortableness, right? that you were still experiencing those same energies once you got back home.
Yes, 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 yes.
And I knew that we had to kind of clear that what I like to
Mhm,
call the murkiness away.
mhm,
And I also knew that you needed some love, just some
mhm.
tender, loving care, TLC,
Yep,
um, at an energetic level, right?
yes.
And so I do incorporate healing stones in my session. So I did a full grid with you, and I used amethyst points that were pointing out because I wanted any energy that really didn't belong or is no longer serving you to be filtered out. And that's what the amethyst points intention was. And then I incorporated the rose quartz, which we know is the stone
Mhm.
of unconditional love at the heart chakra. It's just a beautiful, beautiful, serene vibration. And I think it's so beautiful how, even though this Reiki session was very impromptu in a sense,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it was the most powerful Reiki session that you've had with me.
Absolutely. 110% agree. Yep.
And I'll hand it off to you. Maybe you can share a little bit about what you experienced.
Wow. It it was definitely, like you said, it was the most transformative Reiki session that I had, and I believe that was my 4th one, I believe, and it had been a while since I had one, actually. And so as you set up the bed, I remember laying down, and you told me to inhale and exhale, and I did that. And then you had your music going, you had the smells of Palo Santo and incense and all that jazz. And I just felt like I remember feeling when I laid down on the table like, like, okay. And so at some point, I felt like my feet were really, really hot, like almost like a candle was under them, like they were so on fire, if you will. And then they went ice cold at some point.
Mhm.
I remember feeling like, and these are what I'm explaining right now are all sensations. None of this happened. It was the sensations that I felt in my body because I think that there needs to be clarity there. But I
Mhm.
felt like what I saw in my mind, like this gold oozing gel, if you will, like oozing down my scalp. That's what I felt. I felt heat over my body. And again, you're never touching, like you're just moving your hand, which my eyes are closed, but that's what I feel like that's what you're doing. Um, I feel touches like at some point
Mhm.
on my right and my left specifically, and I don't know if I said this, but on my right and my left sides.
Mhm.
I believe as it relates to sensation for now, and you help me remember if I'm forgetting something because we've
Mhm.
had this conversation already. But I remember I have 3 visions, and
Mhm.
this is going to set the tone for the rest of this conversation. The very first vision that I had on a yellow dress, and it was my future self with her hand out. I took her hand, and she showed me every single dream that I had been writing down in my Start Today journal,
Mm.
from the beach house to Oprah to Essence Fest. She showed me my dreams. And I remember at that point, I started crying a lot. And then I
Mhm.
smiled because what I had been writing down and the dreams that I have inside of me, it was confirmation that these dreams are going to come true. And so she showed me her dreams, and I remember crying. The second dream that I had, or excuse me, the second vision was my husband he's going to open an art gallery. And I feel like as I'm growing my company, I'm going to be able to support him with that. Now, I never saw the gallery, but I saw him. And I don't even know if I saw him. I felt his energy. That is what it was. I felt the joy. I felt the peace. I felt the happiness. And I remember crying because here I am. I'm like, oh, the dreams that she showed me, they all came true.
Mhm.
Now, the next thing is you have the resources to support your husband, and he doesn't have to work anymore. And now he can have his dream. And I remember crying.
Mhm.
The third vision that I had, I was in a yellow dress.
Mm.
And we were at my beach house. All my friends, all my family were there. There were stream lights. There was a DJ. There was fresh food. There was dancing. There was laughter. We were having a good time. We were celebrating the third opening of my location. And the dreams that I had manifested, we were just happy and joyous, and everybody was there and they felt so good. My grandmother wasn't there, but my mother was there.
Wow.
And this part always makes me emotional because if you've listened to my story, my podcast, my episodes about my mother wounds, if you know me personally, you know how tender that is for me.
Yes.
But she was sitting there and she wasn't dancing or anything like that, but she was just so happy to be in the circle. And I remember at that point, that was a heavy cry for me.
Mhm.
And at one point you said, Siobhan, you got to breathe because I don't think I was breathing.
No. Mhm.
And I was happy that she was there. And it was a sense of like, okay, this is good. And then I remember smiling afterwards. And then at some point, as you mentioned earlier, my right hand starts shaking uncontrollably, like
Mhm.
really, really fast. And
Mhm.
there were stones in my hand, but I could not feel the stones anymore. I only felt the shaking. And when God speaks to me, and I don't know if I talked about this on a podcast before, but when God speaks to me, it's through the right side of my body. I've experienced in therapy, I've experienced it in coaching. When God told me very early on when I got laid off from my job, like, this is your opportunity to take a chance on yourself, I heard it in my right ear. That is where God speaks. And so that was like tying it all together, like, yes. And so, yeah, that was my Reiki experience.
Mhm.
And so, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and during Reiki, such as yourself, when you're feeling the heat, that really correlates with direct healing. And even though you may feel it in one area of the body, it could absolutely be transmitting to another part of your body that needs it. And the coolness. So when you talk about how your feet got cold, right, correlates with the release. Like some, I like to call it like a, which one of my clients actually beautifully put this. It's almost like a rinse cycle.
Yes, yes, I love that. I love that.
And in Reiki, when you're as the client, if you're able to really relax, and that's why I do walk my clients through deep breathing at the start, walk you through a grounding exercise so that you can really get relaxed and with the hope and intention to surrender, right?
Hmm.
Because,
Hmm.
why get to this point and still have, anxiousness and worry or fear, or what have you? But so that you can completely surrender and have the complete experience, which will, for some, and every experience is different, for each client. But as yourself with having the visions, and some clients, they may call it dream, vision, it's all relative, that where at a spiritual level, you will get these visions and guidance, right? And they're there to serve as a symbol on your journey, or even a um, premonition to what's to come. So when you talk about how your future self really stepped up and guided you, right? And showed you all of your dreams. I mean, how beautiful
Oh, yes.
is that, and how powerful. And when you are as well connected to people who you love, whether they're still in the physical realm or have transitioned, they may show up as well. So when you talk about your husband, right? You there's no denying that you and David are soulmates, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so for him to that energy to show up, right? Not only to show what's in store for you, but what's in store for your better half as well,
Yes,
your fiance.
yes, yes.
And your mother.
God,
I
good
think
God.
when you told me that, I probably was like screaming inside. I was like, mind blown
Yes, yes.
because
You, me, yes.
I know your story. I know what you have been through
Mm,
from the mother wounds themselves to the healing of the mother wounds to then sharing and that being transferred to your community, um, to help them heal their mother wounds. And now for this vision of your mother to be sitting there, and what I recall you sharing is that she was sitting there so proud,
yes, she was so proud. She
so
was. She was happy to just be in the circle. And
yeah,
something I just thought about when I watched that Marco Polo when I was walking outside, that is what I honed in on when you said she was watching the video from my mother wounds. This is pre-Reiki.
mhm.
So for me to have that experience in that moment, to then get to Reiki for her to be there, like, and we're not even done yet, y'all, because
Yeah,
there's still more to this. So I guess so that afterwards, we debrief, and you asked me like, okay, well, what did you see? What was happening? And so I shared everything that I just shared, and hey, hey, guys. So, thank you so much for listening to part one of this two-part series. This conversation went longer than my traditional episode, so I wanted to break it up because it is very lengthy. So, stay tuned for part two, and I would love to hear your feedback, whether you DM me on Instagram at Be Free Project. You can shoot me an email. My email address is always listed in the show notes. You can share this episode with a friend. You can share it in your IG stories and tag me at Be Free Project. Text the link to a friend, and just let me know how you like the episode. What were your key takeaways and all that jazz? And until next time, girl, be free.